Thank you very much, Rory, and great delight to be here. I've had the privilege of being the rural advocate over the last 6 years, and it's been a great joy to be able to travel around many rural communities in England, and to tease out where are the sort of the basic issues that are around in those rural communities. And it's very interesting, next to affordable rural housing, which is the #1 issue out there in rural communities, it is broadband access and mobile phone coverage that comes out as the second most important issue facing rural communities today. And it's also been quite interesting that I sort of popped into estate agents in market towns as I've travelled around rural England. And ask the question, what do actually people come in here and ask you about buying a new house? And obviously the natural things of number of bedrooms and where it's situated. And without exception, the estate agents have come back to me and said the #1 issue that they come out with is, does the place have broadband access and mobile phone coverage? So you can see how important this particular day actually is. I think lack of access to digital technology and inadequate broadband and mobile phone telephone coverage, combined with a lack of engagement with digital technology, all contribute to a complex set of issues for rural communities. And I was very pleased to hear what the Minister said this morning, and it is, I believe, very important that rural communities are not actually left behind. I've been asked to speak about the importance of broadband to rural communities, and I just want to highlight one or two reasons. First, and perhaps more importantly, there is the issue of business sustainability and enabling rural communities to fulfil their true economic potential. I've visited Cybermoor up in Alston Moor on a couple of occasions with Daniel Heary, and I'm a great fan of Cybermoor because I think it's a great illustration of what actually can be achieved. For example, 25% of their customers use their PCs to work from home versus a national average of 7.4% of the population. The project has directly contributed in the creation of 26 jobs. And the estimated economic value to Alston is over £300,000. And even in those rural communities without superfast broadband, the incidence of rural home working is as much as 3 times greater than that for urban areas. The potential for the growth of home working is therefore huge, with obvious consequences both for the local economy and indeed the carbon footprint for rural communities, where increased travel accounts for a large proportion of emissions. And most rural businesses are by definition very small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs as we call them, a key source of innovation and rural wealth creation. And many of these small businesses are already adversely affected by inadequate broadband connectivity. For example, unable to unload or download large file sizes quickly, unable to run efficient website operations, thereby being cut off from potential online markets, or unable to run integrated applications with their clients, such as simple monitoring of stock levels. And where rural businesses do actually have access to adequate broadband, they can actually thrive. In the Commission for Rural Communities 2008 report, England's Rural Areas, Steps to Release Their Economic Potential, show that rural businesses are more likely to support international markets than their urban counterparts. And the illustration down in Bratton Fleming in Devon is a very good example of that, of shipping out medical equipment to poorer parts of Africa. Another good example, highlighted in our report, Mind the Gap report last year, is the International Dry Bulk Terminal Group, And the group, as some of you know, is an international bulk haulage network which relocated to a remote rural area thanks to a project providing fast broadband links. And the business is located in a remote countryside 50 kilometres from the nearest city, that is Carlisle. And the business actually represents an important trend of knowledge-based service sector, SMEs relocating and bringing high-profile income jobs into rural areas. And without adequate broadband provision, SMEs and micro-businesses in rural areas, such as the illustration I've just given, would actually lose out to competitors. And this actually damages small businesses. Another industry, of course, which is very important, especially in this area, in Cumbria, is that of farming. And I have met numerous farmers in the last few years, especially up here in Cumbria, who find difficulty in getting broadband and mobile phone coverage. And especially that creates enormous problems for them, as nearly everything coming out, for example, of government departments, and especially DEFRA, want people to use online services. And if we're not careful, then this is going to cause enormous problems. Then, of course, that leads to the second important issue of equitable access to public services. And the UK has the highest number of public services available online, some 89% compared to around 70% in France and Germany. And this move has benefited government as the delivery of key public services has taken and transformed many of these businesses. Thus, over the last 5 years, broadband internet has changed from a luxury to indeed being a fourth utility for most of the UK's population. For example, with only 23 job centres in rural areas, the job search opportunities and the online training operations provided by the internet are actually vital to many people living out there in rural communities. And those rural communities without this utility risk actually being excluded from some of the very basic public services that many people in this country take for granted. But the provision of a universal service commitment to rural communities also has a great potential for government savings, and this is particularly can be seen within the health service. And then thirdly, there is the opportunities presented by the internet for education and lifelong learning. Research has already shown that digital inclusion, including pupils, are likely to perform much better academically, with an increase of 25% in GCSE pass grades per subject. But it is in the training and lifelong learning areas where digital inclusion can actually have even a greater impact. And the ability to use computers and the internet commands increased salary premiums of between 3 and 10%. Poor education and low skill levels can lock people into low-income jobs, into perpetual deprivation. And one of my greatest concerns is around young people with low aspirations who especially live in our coastal areas, around Cumbria and Yorkshire and Lincolnshire, for example. Therefore, digital inclusion and wider access to broadband is actually vital to maintain the standards, and not only to maintain, but actually to increase many of the standards we have come to expect. And we know that the demand from rural communities already exists. In May 2008, Ofcom published a report which found that rural households are now more likely to have broadband connections than those who live in urban areas, including the 59% of rural households had broadband services compared to 57% in urban homes. But I believe that there are solutions out there also. We know the issue, we know some of the problems, so we must look to the solutions. As seen in Alston, or indeed in Rutland, community enterprises have the potential to fill some of these gaps in the coverage. Community enterprises which epitomise, if you like, the government's big society agenda of community development and funding is actually critical at this particular point. The Commission for Rural Communities has therefore, because of this backcloth and trying to seek solutions, drawn together a steering group of some of the key players in the arena, including representatives from within government, to discuss the ways in which we can deliver this support, enable such projects to spring up across rural England, by drawing together existing resources of advice and expertise, by acting as an independent hub, and by advocating for face-to-face advice in support of these resources. And as we work together, that goal over the coming months, we are happy to support the Eden Valley in providing a testbed for community involvement in broadband solutions. I believe this is a great opportunity. I believe that this day is of incredible importance. And can I actually make a plea for young people? Because my Rural Advocates report this year was focused on young people. And when I met many of them out there in rural communities, it is young people who really want access to broadband and mobile phone coverage. And if we do not deliver, this is the moment to try to deliver. And if we do not deliver, then I believe we are letting the next generation down. So let's go for it. Let's actually deliver. Thank you very much.